Your diploma is cute, but until you're standing on a $2 million estate, you are basically nothing. That sentence hit harder than the champagne bubbles. I was still holding the maroon folder the dean had handed me an hour earlier. Inside was the parchment that said I had finished my graduate degree, black ribbon pressed flat under my thumb. Laughter drifted up from the string lights in my friend's backyard where we were celebrating. A camera phone hovered like a hummingbird. I kept my face calm, my spine straighter than the stemware. The voice belonged to Taylor, polished watch, perfect blazer smile that never touched the eyes. Taylor always measured rooms the way a broker measured square footage. To Taylor, everything had a price, and every person had a category. We had been seeing each other for a few months, long enough for our names to get braided into group chats and weekend plans, not long enough for Taylor to know that I grew up counting receipts and keeping every guarantee paper in a plastic sleeve. I slid the folder into a canvas tote and told my hands not to shake. The word nothing floated above the patio like a balloon nobody wanted to catch. Phones glowed. One friend laughed too loudly and then apologized with her eyes. Another lifted a glass, the thin ring of crystal shivering in the night air. I noticed the small things to keep from noticing the big thing, the wax drip on the citronella candle, the condensation ring under Taylor's glass, the white envelope peeking from my tote, its flap embossed by a notary stamp. I had been carrying that envelope since afternoon when I left the lawyer's office with a copy of my grandparents' trust deed, the one that said their estate would eventually pass to me whenever the last tax knot was unpicked. "Come on, Liv," Taylor said, turning toward the phones. "We are joking. Everyone knows you are smart. I am just saying in this country, credentials are cute, but assets make the world listen." A few heads nodded. A few eyes flinched away. I smiled without showing teeth. I did not defend myself. I did not invite Taylor into the part of my life that smelled like paper and cedar, where I had spent Saturday mornings reading about inheritance law and municipal taxes, while my classmates were club hopping. People think revenge is lava hot and sudden. For me, it is snow. It falls quietly, it accumulates, and then roofs bend under the weight. "Tell me where you are watching from," I said into the nearest phone with a calm that surprised even me, and hit that subscribe. "We need to talk about families and money." Someone choked on a laugh. Someone muttered, "She is doing a bit." That was fine. I let the room believe what it wanted. A tiny red light stared at me from the corner of a lens. Posts fly faster when they have a clean villain and a quiet target. I set the tote down beside the cake stand. Confetti fluttered. A paper star stuck to my heel. The party carried on the way parties do when one person has just been crowned and another has just been cut. The playlist shifted to a throwback ballad that made the 30-somethings nostalgic. A classmate from corporate finance asked Taylor about venture markets, and Taylor began explaining how high net worth families hide risk in plain sight, all smooth vowels and gentle superiority. I stood near the herb pots breathed in basil and counted the reasons I was not going to cry. If you grew up like I did, you learned to make lists. In my childhood kitchen, there was a corkboard with clipped coupons and a calendar dotted with due dates. We were not poor, not exactly. We just never trusted the month to finish gently. My grandparents were the exception. They built a little empire, the slow way, one modest building at a time, one careful partnership at a time, no parties, no speeches. When my grandfather was alive, he said a thing that sounded plain until you needed it: the loudest room does not change the math. I watched Taylor hold court. I let the humiliation settle into the belly where it could go quiet and cold. Someone clinked a spoon against a glass and joked that my Lexus looked like a rental, like a placeholder for the vehicle I would buy when I finally arrived. Laughter again, thin as tissue. I could have said the car was paid in full, that it had taken me 3 summers, and a savings plan color coded by month, that there is dignity in choosing reliable over flashy. I did not. I tugged the tote closer with my foot and felt the edge of the envelope press my ankle, a paper reminder that I had other levers to pull. What the phones would not catch was the small arrangement behind the scenes. Taylor had been living in a penthouse sublet. I negotiated a place with floor-to-ceiling glass and a lease that looked like a magazine spread. The discount came from my side, from years of careful saving and a favor cashed with a family friend property manager, a retired officer who liked rules and disliked theatrics. Taylor called it a temporary arrangement, like everything temporary, that quietly becomes permanent when no one says stop. I smiled when somebody asked for a group photo. We lined up with crooked smiles and crowded shoulders. Taylor slipped an arm around my waist and squeezed, as if to remind me who held the room. When I lifted my head, the camera caught calm eyes and a straight mouth. My grandmother used to say elegance is doing less than people expect and getting more than you were promised. You want to know how I felt? Here it is without perfume. First shock and electric buzzing in my teeth, then the briefest loneliness, a step backward in my own body while the room moved forward without me. Then the practiced quiet that comes from not wanting to spill even a drop of the dignity you fought to keep. Then something harder to name, a bright thread of anger, stitched with clarity. Not rage, not screaming. Just a decision forming sentence by sentence. I did not leave early. I helped a friend carry a stack of plates inside. I wrapped a wedge of cake in foil and slid it into the fridge. I thanked the host, hugged the two aunties who had come to see their favorite students, and nodded at Taylor as if I were the kind of person who accepted lectures on assets with a grateful heart. I took the tote, checked the envelope with the raised seal, and walked out into a night that smelled like wet concrete and honeysuckle. In the car, I let my throat burn for 1 minute. I set a timer on my phone, watched the seconds crawl, and then told the grief to put its shoes on and go. There would be time for softness later. There would not be time for mistakes. The engine hummed. Streetlights passed like commas. I did not call Taylor. I did not text friends and demand their loyalty. I drove to my apartment, placed the maroon folder and the white envelope side by side on the kitchen table, and made tea the way my grandfather taught me. Water first, then patience. The envelope held the copy of the trust deed and the letter from the lawyer, a man named Robert who smelled faintly of cedar and ink. He had explained earlier that afternoon in a voice like a violin string that some paperwork takes time to ripen. When it does, it changes the weather of a life. I touched the notary seal. The paper was cool. On the table lay the secondary folder, the one with my copies of leases and amendments, the one that said in dry legal phrases what could and could not be adjusted when a concession ended. Numbers are not aggressive. They sit there with their flat faces and wait to be read. I read them. I will tell you the next part in a moment because this part matters. Humiliation is not the story, it is the door. People think revenge is about noise. Mine began with a phone call made without raising my voice a favor, rescinded without a single insult, a pen lifted and a date filled in at the bottom of a page. But that is getting ahead. For now, remember this backyard, and that sentence about being nothing without an estate. Remember the cameras and the laughter and the envelope that pressed against my ankle like a patient animal. Remember that calm is not the opposite of fury. Sometimes it is the instrument that plays it. If you are still with me, tell me where you are listening from and tap subscribe. Families and money braid tighter than any rope. The rest of the knot is coming. When the video went online, I did not even know at first. I was rinsing dishes, humming an old tune when a coworker texted, "Hey, you are on TikTok." I opened the link. There it was. Taylor's words, the laugh track of friends, my calm face framed under string lights. The caption someone wrote was cruel and simple. Imagine getting a degree and still being broke. LOL. Within hours, it had thousands of views, little comments fluttering like gnats. She looks so stiff. Bet she is still driving a beat-up car. One even wrote nothing without the estate true words. I put my phone face down on the table. My tea had gone cold. The envelope with the raised seal still lay beside the maroon folder, silent witness to what the world thought was comedy. I did not call anyone. That evening, the group chat buzzed. Friends sent screenshots. Someone tagged me with a laughing emoji. I typed nothing. My silence was its own message. Later that night, Taylor messaged Babe, "You are taking it too seriously." It was a joke. Another message followed. "People love banter. This is how social works." The third came with a photo, Taylor grinning at brunch, mimosa in hand. No apology, just performance. I remember staring at that screen, the glow painting my apartment walls. The quiet hum of the fridge, the faint smell of basil from the windowsill pot, it all felt steady while my insides shifted like sand. Humiliation is not just being laughed at. It is being unseen. It is having your name turned into shorthand for less than, while people who once held your hand now clap at your downfall. By the next morning, my inbox carried the story too. A colleague wrote, half joking, "So, when do we get to see the $1 million estate?" Another offered sympathy, but in a way that only spread the sting. "Don't let them bully you. You are worth more than money." Worth more, but still measured against it. I drove to campus for a lecture that morning. Students whispered, a few chuckled when I walked by. Phones tilted in hands. That is how fast things move now. Privacy does not live in this decade. Taylor sent another text at lunch. "Look, I will smooth this." Dinner tonight, I stared at the 3 dots pulsing, then disappearing. I did not answer. That afternoon, lawyer Robert called. He was a careful man, spoke like every word had weight. You left my office yesterday with important documents, he said. Remember, they are not just paper, they are levers. Levers. Yes. I thought of the penthouse, the sublease, the quiet deal I had brokered with years of savings. That was not charity, it was structure. And structures could shift. By evening, the video passed 50,000 views. A new account had stitched it with commentary. Lesson, love is temporary, assets permanent. People argued in the comments. Some mocked me, others defended me, but none of them knew me. They only knew the clip cropped to 30 seconds of someone else's laughter. Taylor showed up uninvited. Knocked with that familiar rhythm, 3 short, 2 long. I opened the door just wide enough. You went viral, Taylor said, grinning like it was a lottery win. I asked, is this funny to you? Taylor shrugged. Attention is currency. We should use it. Imagine sponsorship deals, podcasts, think about the exposure. Exposure, like a wound left uncovered. I closed the door slowly, firmly. On the other side, Taylor's voice rose muffled through the wood. Do not overreact. This is nothing. But it was not nothing. Humiliation in public is never nothing. It stains, it spreads, it etches into memory, like ink that does not wash. That night, I wrote 3 lines in my notebook. 1. Silence is not surrender. 2. The lease is written in my name. 3. Humiliation is only the prologue. The maroon folder and the envelope lay under the lamp, their shadows long across the table. I tapped them once like a gavel. The next act was waiting. But what Taylor did not know, what no one in that glowing backyard knew, was that humiliation is the seed, and seeds, when buried deep enough, do not rot. They grow. Tell me where you are listening from. Subscribe, because this story has only begun to turn. The morning after I woke, to silence the kind that presses on your chest, I brewed coffee black and bitter and spread the papers across my table. The lease for the penthouse, the bank statements, the trust deed with its embossed stamp. Each page had its own weight. Robert the lawyer had underlined a clause when we met last month. Adjustments to rent are permissible at the 30-day mark, reverting to full market value. At the time, I had nodded absently, not knowing it would become a blade. Now those dry words looked alive. My phone buzzed. A message from a friend. Have you seen this? Then came the screenshot. Taylor had sent an email not to me, but to an old college buddy. A careless thread that someone leaked. In it, Taylor wrote, just a matter of time. Once we marry, I'll secure that estate. Imagine the headlines, MBA with inheritance partnered with me. Solid upgrade. My throat went dry. I read it again. Secure, not love, not build. Secure like I was a piece of property waiting to be claimed. I set the phone down. My hands shook, but my breath came steady. That is the thing about betrayal. It startles, but it also clarifies. The laughter at graduation had been public. This was private, sharpened in the dark. I called Robert. Pull the lease, I said. Full market rate. 30 days. He hesitated, then asked, You are certain? I am, I replied, and cut the utilities support. When I hung up, the quiet in my apartment felt less heavy. I thought of my grandfather's words. The loudest room does not change the math. By afternoon, the group chat lit up. Someone had shared the leaked email. Comments flew. One friend wrote, This is low, even for Taylor. Another, You okay? I typed nothing. Silence was becoming my shield. Taylor, however, did not stay silent. First came the messages. You read things out of context. Then, we were joking around. By evening, the tone shifted. You can't do this. People will think you're cruel. I did not reply. But at midnight, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Taylor's voice strained and rising. You vindictive child. You think you can pull strings. You need me more than I need you. Without me, you are just a name on paper clutching a diploma nobody cares about. I listened twice, then saved it. Evidence, not noise. The next morning, I took a walk by the river. Leaves skittered on the pavement, boats rocked gently. Betrayal hurts, yes, but it also clears space. The river reminded me, currents always move forward. I tucked my hands in my coat and whispered to myself, This is only the beginning. But what Taylor did not know was that Robert had more than leases and clauses. He had another envelope, one I had not yet opened. I did not answer Taylor's calls. I did not dignify the stream of texts that swung from mockery to pleading. Instead, I waited for Robert to file the notice. 30 days full market rent utilities cut. Numbers do not shout, but they pierce sharper than insults. The first sign of impact came quickly. Taylor stormed into my office lobby, voice carrying above the security desk. "You cannot do this to me. We had an arrangement." Heads turned. Phones hovered, pretending not to record. I walked past without pausing, a nod to the guard, my folder clutched like scripture. Later that evening, Robert called. Delivery confirmed. Tenant was less than pleased. His voice was calm, but I could almost hear the smirk tucked inside. By nightfall, Taylor's anger had shifted online. A post appeared. Some people show their true colors when given power. Cruel, petty, vindictive. The words dripped with self-pity. I did not reply. The internet did. Comments poured beneath the post clips of the graduation party. Taylor's laughter. The toast that mocked me. Strangers wrote, "You humiliated her first." Funny how assets become petty only when you lose them. That would have been enough, but then came the real fracture. A friend forwarded me a message, Taylor ranting in a private group. She thinks she's clever pulling the rent stunt. She forgets who made her relevant. Without me, she's invisible. Invisible. That word stung, though less than before. Betrayal already hardened me. I sat at my kitchen table, the maroon folder open, the trust deed gleaming under lamplight. Next to it, my notebook bore 3 fresh lines. 4. Never argue where evidence can speak. 5. Humiliation is temporary. Eviction is permanent. 6. Silence sharpens the blade. Taylor left another voicemail, voice breaking this time. "We can fix this. Just don't do anything rash. People are watching." Exactly. People were watching. That weekend, I joined a small dinner with mutual friends. Taylor showed up uninvited again, glass in hand, words dripping sugar. "We all know she is overreacting. Nobody really thinks I meant harm." I let the group watch me slide my phone across the table. With a tap, the voicemail played. "You vindictive child. Without me, you are just a name on paper." The room went still. Forks hovered, eyes widened. Taylor's face drained of color. I said nothing more. Silence again was louder than rage. But what Taylor and everyone else in that quiet dining room did not know was that Robert's other envelope was still sealed. Inside it lay more than leases and rent hikes. Inside it lay a shift big enough to turn Taylor's smirk into dust. Taylor's post spread like wildfire. "She is cruel, she is petty, she ruined me." The words were accompanied by a carefully filtered photo, eyes red, as if from tears, caption, begging sympathy. Some followers offered comfort, but most remembered the graduation video. Comments stacked like bricks. "Weren't you the one who called her nothing? Funny how rent feels different when you have to pay it." By evening, hashtags spun my name and Taylor's together, a digital storm no one could control. I sat by the window, tea cooling in my hand, phone buzzing every minute. Friends sent links, screenshots, even memes. My silence was the loudest statement I could make. But the storm deepened. Another leak surfaced, screenshots of Taylor's email. The one bragging, "Once we marry, I'll secure her estate. Solid upgrade." No defense could soften those words. They spread across platforms, commentary piling on. Strangers debated love versus money. Some called Taylor calculating. Others called me naive. But all agreed betrayal was written in plain text. Taylor tried again. Another post. "This is character assassination. We were joking. Everyone knows sarcasm." The replies came swift and brutal. "You don't joke about estates. Looks like the joke's on you." Then came the breaking point. A podcast picked up the story, dissecting the video, the emails, the voicemails. Hosts chuckled between bites of commentary. One said, "This is a classic case, mock someone's diploma depend on their lease, then cry when the math changes." Laughter echoed through the segment. I listened once, then shut it off. The world had taken my humiliation and turned it into entertainment. Yet strangely, I did not feel small. For the first time, Taylor's words carried no weight. They had become evidence. That weekend, Taylor appeared outside my building, voice hoarse, clothes rumpled. "You destroyed me," they shouted. "You ruined my life." Phones recorded from across the street. I stepped outside only long enough to say calmly, "You did that yourself." The crowd murmured. Someone clapped. Taylor staggered back then, left swallowed by the city lights. That night, Robert visited. He placed a thick envelope on the table. "You have choices now," he said. His eyes were steady, almost grave. "This is more than property. It is inheritance. It is control." I touched the envelope but did not open it yet. Timing mattered. The story was not finished. Instead, I wrote again in my notebook. 7 exposure is not punishment, it is mirror. 8 control is not taken, it is claimed. As I closed the book, my phone lit with one more message from Taylor. "You think you won, but you have no one. You are alone." Alone, perhaps, but not empty. And what Taylor did not know, what even Robert had not yet said aloud, was that inside that envelope lay the kind of authority that no social storm could shake. The 30 days passed faster than I imagined. Each sunrise carried another thread of Taylor's unraveling life: whispers from friends, angry posts, screenshots of desperate messages. The penthouse, once a showroom of glass and shine, grew dim. Rent at market value was beyond Taylor's reach. Utilities cut lights flickered like weak candles. When the deadline came, Robert called. "Payment not received," he said simply. "Eviction in motion." That evening I walked past the building. Boxes stacked by the curb clothes spilling from an open suitcase. Taylor stood in the lobby, voice sharp at the manager, but no one moved to help. Phones recorded again. Humiliation had flipped its stage. One message from a mutual friend read, "It's over. Taylor has to leave." Another added, "Funny someone who mocked estates is now homeless." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt steady, almost cold. Revenge does not always taste sweet. Sometimes it tastes like clarity. By the weekend, the friend circle fractured. Some admitted they had long suspected Taylor's motives, but fear kept them quiet. Others clung to neutrality, unwilling to choose. I did not argue. Silence remained my shield. Taylor's family, once distant, tried to intervene. A sister called me, voice pleading, "Can't you reconsider? They made mistakes, but eviction is harsh." I replied, "The lease was paper, not promise. Paper has rules." News traveled beyond our circle. Online forums debated the case. Some painted me as calculating, others as resilient. I read none of it after the first week. Noise could not change math. At home, I brewed tea, walked the river path, and finally opened Robert's second envelope. Inside was not only confirmation of the estate, but also controlling interest in a family company, shares that shifted more power than any lease ever could. I closed my eyes and let the weight settle. Taylor had called me nothing. Yet now, with property inheritance and control, I carried more than Taylor ever dreamed to secure. Still, revenge is never only about possession. It is about revelation. Watching Taylor dragged from glass to gravel, I realized humiliation was complete. Not an eviction, but in truth laid bare, loyalty-tested motives exposed. Alone in my apartment, I whispered the line I had written weeks earlier. Inheritance isn't just money, it is the filter of loyalty. But what Robert had not yet told me, what lingered in his pause on the phone, was that the estate carried one more condition, a final twist waiting to surface. I moved quietly through the estate gates the following week. The iron creaked old but strong like the hands of my grandparents that once turned soil and balanced ledgers. The house rose ahead 2 stories of stone and memory. Windows glinted under a late autumn sun, reflecting not pride but permanence. Inside, dust sheets covered furniture corners smelled faintly of cedar. I walked the halls as though retracing my childhood, though truth be told, I had spent more years imagining this place than living in it. My hand trailed the banister. Each curve carried stories of arguments, reconciliations, and lessons whispered across decades. Taylor was nowhere in these walls. That mattered. For once the silence was not heavy, it was chosen. Robert arrived late in the afternoon, briefcase in hand. He poured tea into china cups my grandmother had guarded with ceremony. "You understand," he said, "this estate is fully yours now. Not just in name, but in function. The paperwork cleared this morning." I nodded. The truth was still sinking in. Months earlier, I had been mocked in a backyard, told I was nothing without property. Now every acre, every key sat under my hand. Robert's eyes lingered. "There is something else," he said. He handed me yet another envelope, this one thinner, bearing my grandfather's scrawl. Inside was a note written years before control does not reveal character. Loss does. "Let those who laugh test themselves. You need only to stand steady." I read it twice, then set it beside the tea. The old man had known. Perhaps he had even planned for betrayal to be part of my education. That evening, I walked the grounds. Trees bent under the wind, Leaves skittered across gravel. For a moment I thought of Taylor, face pressed against glass words, dripping cruelty voice cracking in voicemail. Then I let it pass. Some shadows do not deserve a place on bright lawns. The estate felt both heavy and light. Heavy with history, light with possibility. I knew then that revenge had already ended. The point was not to break Taylor further. The point was to stand in these halls unshaken, proven not by diploma or by mockery, but by endurance. When I returned inside, I wrote a final note in my notebook. 9 betrayal is a mirror. 10 revenge is a lesson. 11 loyalty is the only inheritance that matters. I closed the book and placed it atop the maroon folder and the sealed deed symbols of the journey's arc. But before the night ended, Robert's words echoed in my mind. There was still one clause, one condition in the trust he had hinted, and I had yet to face it. The final meeting with Robert took place on a gray morning. Rain tapped steady against the office windows, soft percussion that made the room feel suspended in time. His desk was lined with folders, but one envelope sat alone in the center cream paper seal unbroken. This, Robert said, sliding it toward me, is the last clause. I peeled it open slowly, careful with the flap, as though history might tear if I rushed. Inside lay a single page, handwritten by my grandmother. Her words were plain without flourish. The estate passes whole, not to be divided. It must remain intact, under your guidance. Alongside it, you inherit majority shares of the family company. Protect both, for they are more than assets. They are trust built with sweat and silence. I read it aloud in a whisper. The weight pressed on me, not as burden but as clarity. I had not just inherited walls and windows. I had inherited the responsibility to keep them steady. Taylor's voice echoed in memory. Without me, you are just a name on paper. How small those words now seemed. A name on paper can hold land, deeds, votes, futures. A name on paper can outlast any voice raised in mockery. Robert cleared his throat. You see, this was never only about property. It was about proving you could stand when tested. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. For the first time in months, I exhaled without weight in my chest. That evening, I walked the halls of the estate once more. Shadows stretched long, but they no longer felt lonely. Each step rang like confirmation. This was mine, yes, but also more than mine. It was a chapter continuing from hands that had worked, saved, and guarded. Taylor's downfall no longer mattered. Public laughter, viral clips, bitter posts, they had already dissolved into digital dust. What remained was quieter, stronger, the truth that humiliation cannot erase inheritance and betrayal cannot steal endurance. On the porch I looked out over the ground's rain, now easing into mist. I thought of all the voices that had called me nothing. I thought of the silence I had chosen instead of shouting. And then I thought of tomorrow. If you believe I chose right, I said aloud into the evening air, comment right. If you would have handled Taylor differently, share your idea. The mist curled around the trees, carrying my words into the night.